Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, DEMANTRA Replenishment Optimization. My name is Deb Bryant. I'm the Marketing Coordinator at AVATA, and I will be facilitating the webinar today. Presenting today are Dwayne Hardiker, Managing Partner at AVATA, and An Nguyen, Consulting Manager and Solution Architect at AVATA. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dwayne.
Thank you, Deb. Hey, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining this. We want to cover a few things. We're going to quickly do an overview of AVATA. My marketing team makes me do this, so you have to bear with me. It's only a couple slides for those of you who already know AVATA. Then we're going to do a solution overview and what we call our AVATA Express solutions in this replenishment optimization space. I'm going to go over some quick concepts and general capabilities, and then I'll hand it over to Ann, and she will do a solution deep dive with some screenshots to show you some of our solutions around this area and what's possible, specifically, you know, safety stock and inventory analysis, and then replenishment planning. So AVATA is a global consulting firm. Our DNA started in supply chain. That's what we focus in. That's still a core element of who we are, with resources all over the world. But we have evolved as the markets evolved of late and gotten into a J.D. Edwards practice as well as Oracle Cloud solutions, both SCM and ERP. But again, we're still anchored with the fact that we are operations and supply chain specialists. Kind of what's made us successful over the past decade is the people. You know, we did an interesting study. The average age at AVATA is 43 years old. So it's usually the practitioners that have been in supply chain and leverage a lot of these solutions. We have a significant customer base and customer focus, where for us it really is all about the customer at all costs. And then our strategy. This is kind of key because we can be a one-stop shop, whether coming in from a strategic perspective and talking about processes, metrics, organizational structures, and really nothing to do with technology, but driving that all the way down to a technological software component if need be. So it's from strategy through kind of a technical execution. All right, so today's topic, replenishment optimization. As many of you on this webinar may already have Demantra, and you're familiar with a lot of the core modules of Demantra. However, a couple of these modules have capabilities, and AVATA has amended these capabilities to produce some unique features and functionality that may resolve a business need you have, in part or in whole. So today we'll be focusing on demand management module and real-time sales and operations planning module. These are the two modules that are required for what we call our replenishment optimization solution. Today's session has nothing to do with sales and operations planning. That's just the Demantra module needed to enable the capabilities for our solution. Okay? And with those two modules, you're going to see in today's webinar some of the inventory analysis, safety, stock planning that is capable. That I know that when we've talked to clients about this, they had no idea some of this was available and capable in Demantra, and some of it was built by AVATA as well. And then we're going to go into replenishment planning, another area that a lot of people are unaware that Demantra is capable of doing. The other area that we're not going to touch on today, but it's an area that is there, is service spare parts planning. So Demantra has an actual engine and specific module around service parts forecasting. And then we've connected that module with some of the replenishment planning stuff you're going to see. So there is a service parts component of this. We're not going to talk about that today, just due to time. One of the questions that we get asked is, well, is this a planning solution? Well, there's a gray line. No, it's not meant to be an ASCP or a rapid planning. And based on what your business solution requirement is, or your business environment is, or landscape, this may not be an appropriate solution, or only part of the solution may be appropriate. That's something that needs to be evaluated, because the one thing we don't want to do is position Demantra inappropriately as a solution when it should have been an ASCP or a cloud SCM. So AVATA has what's called our AVATA Express solutions. We have a number of solutions we've built over the years where it's essentially a pre-configured solution in the software with the processes around best practices. So again, we have what we're going to give you a glimpse of today is the Demantra Replenishment Optimization Express solution. Now, because of the nature of this Express solution, we have built multiple versions of it. The base solution goes across all industries, whether you're consumables, consumer goods, industrial manufacturing. The base solution that we've built out can be applied and migrated across any industry. And again, this is a pre-configured solution built on best practices. Roles, responsibilities defined, process flows. What we've also done is taken the base solution and tailored it to 3 specific industries: consumer goods, life science, healthcare, retail, and fashion. And in doing that, what we did is we addressed specific characteristics and challenges of that industry and built that piece of the solution into Demantra. So for consumer goods, dealing with the sell-in, sell-through forecast, dealing with the vast amount of POS data you're getting from retailers, the promotional trade impacts, incorporating Nielsen data, and then the complexities around channel distribution. Again, some of the key characteristics. For life science healthcare, again, the fact that you can't have stockouts. You have to have extremely high service levels. The complexities in a central warehousing versus all the different departmental warehousing, particularly within a hospital. The complexity around demand patterns and limited usage data. The fact that prescription volumes are increasing. And then again, in the healthcare is traditionally a little bit behind in the supply chain arena. And of course, retail, dealing with the fact of size, color, and how to manage that allocation, plan at a higher level and allocate it down. An open to buy plan, the seasonality impacts of retail, one line carrying over from one season to the next versus a large amount of new SKU transitions, new product introductions in a volume basis. And then of course dealing with omni-channel. So again, our Demantra Replenishment Optimization Express solution has a base solution that can be applied to any industry, and then we have built out 3 specific industry sector solutions around this. What you're going to see today in this webinar, especially when Ann goes through her deep dive, you're going to see screenshots from every component. You're going to see some screenshots from our base solution. You're going to see screenshots from our consumer goods, from our healthcare, as well as retail. So what does the solution consist of? So when you look at it from an inventory, safety stock inventory and replenishment, from the demand side, we incorporate into the solution, your typical sales, consensus, statistical forecast should be nothing new to anyone. The 2 pieces that you don't always see is having a, min or max inventory triggers, reorder point triggers, and safety stock triggers. And again, Ann's going to go into some of the deeper dives around the safety stock. From a supply side, from the ERP system, we're bringing in your typical supply information that everyone would expect. And then within Demantra, there's actually some setups that are configurable based on business rules. And again, Ann's going to go into some of this in a little deeper dive, but things like order modifiers, some basic constraints, lead time offsetting. These are things you don't typically think about when you think of Demantra, and what it's it's demand forecasting, so you think forecasting. But again, we're showing you another angle of Demantra from an inventory analysis and replenishment perspective. And again, as I mentioned, it can suggest an open-to-buy plan, build plan, a stocking plan, or even a transfer plan to move inventory around. And the whole idea of the way we structure the solution is it can start at different levels of sophistication. So if you have Demantra and you're a new user to Demantra, but you have some basic safety stock requirements, well, you can leverage that part of our solution, and we can build in some of our advanced safety stock features. And we can then extend that to some of the inventory analysis and inventory planning type stuff. And then depending on what your requirement is, we can build it out further and further. So you can use it, again, for pure analytics, whether it's the inventory and safety stock or the replenishment recommendations. You can have Demantra say, hey, based on what I'm seeing, based on your inventory levels, your safety stock, requirements, I suggest these type of replenishments up to this amount if you have a min-max or an EOQ or whatever business driver you structure in there. And you can either use it as just an analysis tool and say, okay, and then go off and execute it, or you can actually release and execute it from Demantra and let that get pushed into your ERP system. So why Demantra? Again, Demantra, for those of you who already have it, it's an incredibly powerful tool set, which is why I caution that this isn't a gray area, and this is why we would come in and we would look at what our customers' requirements are, because what we will not do is when you should be getting a cloud planning central solution, we're not going to recommend this replenishment solution in Demantra. So there are certain situations though, there's many situations out there though that you can make use of the Demantra tool set and what AVATA has pre-built around this solution. One of the things that is very good about Demantra that people like is the flexibility and ease of use. We are able to build in business rules very easily into Demantra. You can review the replenishment plan suggestions, you can make modifications, and then again, you can either evaluate it or you can actually execute it, load it back into the ERP system. And of course, one of the key things that Demantra gives you the capability to do that's so powerful is do an analytical analysis across your hierarchy, and then look at it in units or dollars. So that's one of the key powers of Demantra that made this a logical solution for building this out. And again, this is the third time I'm mentioning it. I promise I won't mention it again. When should you use Demantra? Well, it makes sense for a lot of customers that already have Demantra, right? And they don't have the need for a full-on planning system or the overhead of a full planning system. But they do have some basic inventory analysis needs, or in some levels, some complex inventory analysis needs, or some replenishment needs, where Demantra would make sense. From an architecture standpoint, this solution architecturally doesn't change from a normal install of Demantra, right? It should sit on its own server, and if you're going to be running some of this part of the solution in replenishment, depending on the number of items you have and the volume, you may have to, not necessarily use commodity hardware. You may need to upgrade the hardware to get the speed you need when you start really extending into some of this area. But again, that just depends on your volumes. But the whole idea is just like, traditional architecture, we load the data in from the ERP system. And again, it doesn't matter if it's SAP, if it's JD Edwards, if it's a data warehouse. We've done it all. And then from there, we run through our series of process flows in Demantra. You configure your business rules, and then the output is an analysis, an inventory plan, a safety stock recommendations, and a replenishment plan. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anne, and she will take you through some of, like I said, some of the screenshots and other aspects, deeper dive on some of the components of this solution.
Thank you, Dwayne. So let me review now, again, on what Dwayne noted. I'm just going to go through solutions and we'll show you examples of what we've built. From a safety stock, you can basically go from a simple to a complex algorithm of generating safety stocks. Looking at your business, do we want to go from a simple calculation or to a more complex calculation? Will we allow the users to update minimum and maximum safety stock values based on other business criteria that are noted later on? We also have the ability to provide unit measures for some industries, where for some industries maybe it's better to order in certain unit measures other than each. You have cases, for example, pallets or rows, where we can define which unit measure is better to hold in generating safety stock. Excuse me. In terms of generating safety stock, the process is, again, generating a stats forecast using either your shipments, usage, or booking data. Once that stats forecast is generated, you can basically make some updates to the forecast to get to a final forecast. And then we also have a forecast error measured on the stats forecast. We also have additional inputs that you can incorporate into generating a safety stock. You can have lead times associated with the items, the cycle count, what's the time frame to count those items, the service level you want to hold, if you have order and carrying costs, and if you want any standard minimum and maximum safety days incorporated into generating your safety stock. So, as I noted earlier, I think safety stocks, you can basically have a simple or a complex calculations. We can have different ways to generate your safety stocks, whether it be a stats forecast or a fixed forecast. Okay, difference between a stats forecast or a fixed forecast can be basically if your data doesn't have enough history to generate a good forecast, should it default to basically a fixed forecast where we look at your history instead of your stats forecast. Right? Again, we can look at calculations based on forecast error incorporated, lead time, service level. Maximums can be based on different calculations, but you can also put it on economic order quantity, with adding the minimums to the maximum values. The user can also override the minimum settings, from a business view. Even though safety stock calculation says that, we want to hold 5, what do we really want to hold 10 as for overall needs of the warehouse? Or you can also override the maximum settings, based again on warehouse constraints, the order quantity, Here are some examples of safety stock targets that we've defined. You have available here kind of a simplistic view of generating safety stock using service levels that you can incorporate. Looking at this, you can basically incorporate using the Demantra hierarchy levels. You can basically define it at any level, which is the beauty of Demantra. You know, you can basically look at your data at different levels and set up parameters and business factors at different levels. You have basically the ability to define the replenishment cycle that you have. You also see the standard error. You can define what type of calculation for safety stock, days of supply, lead time, for example, or the stats forecast. You can also have a graphical view of the data. We can build simplistic views of looking at your data by an item and basically overriding it, saying, here's the recommended min-max based on the calculations with your business inputs, and you can basically override it. For example, you can override the maximum based on, even though the calculation comes out to a higher value, we do have space constraints. And you also have the ability to provide a high-level view of what is the impact to your business with your safety stock setting, looking at the dollars associated with it, and also the ability for approval for management to approve, yes, you know, we understand the impacts of holding the safety stocks, and these are the dollars associated with holding the safety stocks. Next, we'll look at basically looking from a replenishment side of your data. So from a replenishment side, once we have the demand and we also have the safety stock, we can also incorporate in a basic demand and supply netting, right? We can also provide analysis for where your inventory might be high or low, or where you want to order more based on certain criteria, or where we want to transfer because you have excess in one location and you have a shortage in another location. We can look at the thresholds that you can build into the solution so that it determines, you know, when can an item be transferred. Looking at a solution here, you have basically looking at different channels and different customers. We can bring in basically your current inventory, what the warehouses are pulling out from, what the current forecast is, and it will basically calculate what your projected inventory is from a historical view and also looking at a graphical view and its time phase. Next, you also basically determine from an inventory replenishment, can we basically transfer certain inventories. You can look at transferring excess inventory for days on hand, dollars, you know, whether or not you do want to transfer, even though it's excess, but we want to hold that inventory regardless. Okay, calculating the excess here. So you can have analysis where we can look at these are the excess quantities in units and dollars, and basically the excess days on hand available from a dollars point of view. So you know the impact of holding the excess. And then we also have basically defined exception planning. When you have excess or constrained supply, it can highlight for you. And you can also basically determine if it is excess or constrained. We can put in a override where basically from a user point of view, we don't want it to go over a certain amount. Set the allocations. Here's another example of replenish, where if you're familiar with ASCP, you can see basically you have a beginning on hand that we bring in from your source system, in transits, PO information, purchase orders, and also plan orders that are going to be generated that purchasing will fulfill. What's scheduled to ship out from a sales order point of view, and where your projected available on hand, and you can see that it's time phase, that you can see what's the impact of you executing to the supply chain. Again, another view of this where we look at the current inventory come in, you can define the lead times, change it for a what-if analysis. It'll generate a final safety stock, and looking at what your current inventory on hand, and you can set a minimum and maximum for that. Now, for some customers, we also have capacity constraints into the supply chain. What is also available is looking at capacity data from a plan point of view. You know, we can bring in from ASCP or another system your capacity for a particular warehouse, factory, a machine, and determine based on your plan of producing and what is scheduled to ship out, what is it going to be used in terms of the factories or machine, and then we build exception planning so that we can highlight where you have excess or shortage, and then the details available to it.
And this is a good point. This is a good area to point out that you have to be very careful because you could overcomplicate the system. Mm-hmm. This is where, from a capacity perspective, if you wanted to look at more of a rough cut capacity or a bottleneck resource type capacity, that's fine. But if you want to get to finite capacity planning, really detailed level capacity planning, multiple machines, then again, this is where we may say, no, that doesn't make sense. You know, you need to go migrate more towards a advanced supply planning solution versus Demantra. Sorry, Ann.
Looking from a replenishment mode again, here's a more detailed version where basically, again, we can set up alerts and looking at analytics where your supply or your orders are out of sync, and we can highlight that, and then basically you can enter in a quantity so that it constrains it. So this can be sent back to your source system. We can also build a more elaborate system where we can check for insufficient inventory using, certain programs in Demantra. And then once you check for that, it'll send out an alert basically. And again, there's another approval here, the example that you see where we can approve the plan.
So this would be an example of if you wanted to automate more of the replenishment side, where you're bringing in, your open orders, you're bringing in your inventory, and then you're basically, running a quote MRP, demand supply balancing type algorithm that will automatically generate these recommendation orders, and then you can put an approval process around it or not, and then either look at the recommendations from an analytics perspective, dollarize them, understand what the dollar value is going to be and the inventory impact on this replenishment recommendation, make adjustments, and then you can push those recommendations over to your ERP system to, a staging table to generate your purchase requisitions, for example. Go on, Ann. And next slide.
Yes.
All right. Back to you, Deb.
Thank you, Ann and Dwayne. This concludes our webinar presentation. If you have any questions or would like further conversation regarding the materials discussed here, or if we can assist you in any way, please send an email to contact@avata.com. And on behalf of AVATA, thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.